The vermilion suns of Garvox beat down mercilessly upon the ritual arena. Sand particles sparkled like dying stars in the swirling winds as the crowd's anticipation thickened the already stifling air. Axel Voss adjusted his atmospheric filter, a necessary precaution for off-worlders in this harsh environment. He hadn't intended to witness a soul absorption ceremony. Treasure hunting was his business, not cultural immersion. Yet here he stood, another anonymous face in a sea of the pale-skinned Mork tribe. "The absorption brings strength," shouted the ceremonial announcer, his voice amplified across the Colosseum. "The foreign energy becomes our own." Axel grimaced beneath his filter. The infamous ritual was exactly as the Spacer's tales described: barbaric, mesmerizing, and terribly effective. The Garvoxians had perfected the art of siphoning life energy from other species, particularly those with unique abilities. In a galaxy of dwindling resources, they had found their niche, harvesting the metaphysical. The massive cauldron at the center of the arena bubbled ominously. Steam rose in great plumes, carrying the scent of exotic herbs and minerals known to enhance the transfer of energy. High Priest Cthulhu, his skin adorned with pulsating blue runes, raised his ceremonial staff. "Bring forth the energy weaver," he commanded. The crowd roared as guards dragged a small figure toward the platform. Axel leaned forward despite himself. The captive was unmistakably alien, skin a deep violet hue that caught the light in iridescent patterns, large, opalescent eyes, and a slender frame that suggested both fragility and hidden strength. A child, by any reasonable measure, though species aging varied wildly across the galaxy. Something twisted in Axel's gut. He'd seen plenty of unsavory practices in his years traversing the outer systems. The treasure hunter code was simple: observe, don't interfere, stay alive to hunt another day. Yet as the guards lifted the alien girl toward the steaming cauldron, her desperate gaze swept across the audience and locked directly with his. Time seemed to halt. Those eyes, filled with terror but also fierce intelligence, bored into him. Her lips moved, forming words only he could see. "Help me, and I'll show you what you've truly been seeking." Axel's breath caught. How could she possibly know what he sought? His quest for the legendary ancient prism fragments had been his closely guarded obsession for years. Yet, there was something in her expression that spoke of genuine knowledge, not merely desperate bargaining. "The boiling begins," announced Cthulhu, as attendants stoked the flames beneath the cauldron. Axel's hand drifted to his concealed pulse blaster. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings. One man against an entire tribal ritual. On their home planet? Suicide. Yet the girl's eyes never left his, even as the guards began to lower her toward the bubbling liquid. "Damn it all," Axel muttered, his fingers closing around the weapon. He'd always prided himself on being a survivor, not a hero, but sometimes the universe forced your hand. A distraction was needed. Scanning the arena, he noted the ceremonial fuel tanks feeding the massive flames beneath the cauldron. With practiced precision, he adjusted his blaster settings and fired a silent, concentrated pulse at the nearest tank. The explosion was magnificent. Chaos erupted instantly. The crowd scattered in panic as flames engulfed one side of the arena. Guards abandoned their posts to combat the blaze. In the confusion, Axel vaulted over barriers, racing toward the platform where the alien girl dangled precariously above the cauldron, momentarily forgotten by her captors. "What sorcery is this?" bellowed Chief Carrick, his ceremonial headdress askew as he tried to restore order. Axel reached the girl just as she slipped from the loosened grip of a distracted guard. His arms shot out, catching her before she could touch the boiling liquid. Her skin was surprisingly cool against his, despite the oppressive heat. "You came," she whispered, her voice musical yet strained. "Let's not celebrate yet," Axel replied, setting her down and taking her hand. "Running would be good. Very good. Now." They bolted across the arena floor as shouts of alarm rose behind them. Axel led them toward a maintenance tunnel he'd noted earlier, an old habit from years of mapping escape routes wherever he went. The tunnel was narrow and dark, perfect for disappearing into the labyrinthine underbelly of the ancient arena. "They'll seal the city," the girl said as they ran. "The Mork don't forgive ritual interruptions." "I gathered that," Axel replied dryly. "Got a name, by the way, since we're now apparently fugitives together." "Lyra," she answered, her breathing surprisingly even despite their pace. "And you're Axel Voss, the relic hunter who's been searching for the ancient prism." Axel nearly stumbled. "How could you possibly—" "Later," she interrupted. "Guards ahead." Sure enough, armored figures appeared at the tunnel's end, their energy spears crackling with deadly intent. Axel pulled Lyra into a side passage, narrowly avoiding detection. "The desert market," he whispered. "If we can reach it, we might lose them in the crowds." Lyra nodded, her opalescent eyes gleaming in the dim light. "The Resistance has contacts there. If we can find them—" "Resistance?" Axel raised an eyebrow. "You're more than just today's ritual sacrifice, aren't you?" A faint smile touched her violet lips. "You have no idea." The tunnels eventually opened into the sprawling labyrinth of Garvox's infamous black market. Under normal circumstances, Axel would have relished exploring its countless stalls of contraband treasures and exotic artifacts. Now, with Mork guards undoubtedly scouring the city for them, the market's winding alleys offered their best chance at temporary safety. They emerged into a cacophony of sounds, smells, and colors. Vendors hawked wares from 100 worlds. Smugglers negotiated in hushed tones. Beings of all descriptions bartered, stole, and schemed. Axel pulled his hood lower and guided Lyra through the throng, acutely aware of how her violet skin might stand out. "We need to disguise you," he muttered, snagging a shimmer cloth from a distracted vendor's stall. He draped it over Lyra, covering her distinctive features. "Stay close." They weaved through the market, Axel's eyes constantly scanning for threats. 3 times they changed direction to avoid patrol squadrons. Twice, they ducked into crowded stalls when identification drones buzzed overhead. "There," Lyra suddenly whispered, nodding toward a narrow alley between 2 massive tents. The symbol on the wall, 3 broken circles. "That's a resistance marker." Axel frowned. "You sure we can trust them? Resistance movements have a nasty habit of using outsiders as expendable pawns." "We don't have much choice," Lyra replied. "And they're our best hope for reaching the ancient temple." "Temple? I thought we were just trying to escape the city." Lyra's eyes flashed with determination. "Escape is just the beginning. What I promised you, what you seek, is there." Before Axel could respond, shouts erupted behind them. A squad of Mork enforcers had spotted them, their energy spears raised in pursuit. "Decision made," Axel grunted, pulling Lyra toward the marked alley. They sprinted down the narrow passage, dodging refuse and leaping over barriers until they reached a nondescript door bearing the 3 broken circles. Lyra rapped on it in a distinctive pattern. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. Axel readied his blaster, preparing for a last stand, when the door suddenly slid open. "Inside!" hissed a hooded figure. "Quickly!" They tumbled through the entrance, which sealed instantly behind them. Axel found himself in a dimly lit chamber, filled with an eclectic assortment of technology and weapons. A dozen pairs of eyes studied them with mixed expressions of suspicion and curiosity. Their guide lowered his hood, revealing the weathered face of a Garvoxian elder, his pale skin marked with the subtle scars of a deposed nobility. "I am Oral," he said gravely, "former chieftain of the Twilight Clan, now leader of the Hidden Resistance." His piercing gaze settled on Lyra. "We've been expecting you, Keeper." Lyra straightened, shedding her frightened demeanor like an outgrown skin. "The ritual was interrupted, as foreseen. This is Axel Voss, my rescuer. Aurel scrutinized Axel with newfound interest. A treasure hunter become a hero? The prophecies said nothing of this. Prophecies. Axel's patience was wearing thin. Would someone please explain what's happening? One moment I'm watching a barbaric ritual. The next I'm harboring a fugitive who somehow knows about my personal quest. Lyra exchanged glances with Aurel, who nodded slowly. Show him. With delicate movements, Lyra extended her hands, palm upward. A subtle vibration filled the room, and from her fingertips emerged a soft glow that coalesced into intricate patterns. The light formed symbols that Axel recognized with a jolt, the same ancient script he'd seen on fragment maps of the legendary ancient prism. I am the keykeeper, Lyra said softly. The last of my kind, born with the ability to activate the ancient prism, the artifact capable of transforming pure energy into physical power. For generations, my people hid this gift, but the Mork's soul-sensing technology detected me when our ship passed too close to Garvox. They've been boiling aliens to steal their life force for centuries, Aurel added grimly. But never have they captured one with Lyra's potential. King Mork and his sorcerer Cthulhu believed that by absorbing her essence, they could control the prism themselves. Axel's mind raced. The ancient prism, said to be shattered in the last great galactic war, was his lifelong pursuit. Legends claimed it could grant unimaginable power, but he'd sought it for its historical value and the fortune it would bring from collectors. Now, faced with living proof of its capabilities, the stakes had changed dramatically. The prism fragments, he said slowly. You know where they are? Not all, Lyra responded. But the primary fragment, the core piece that can sense and eventually draw the others, is hidden in the ancient temple beyond the desert wastes. I can activate it, but I needed someone who could help me reach it. Her gaze was steady. The universe guided you to me. Axel Voss. The universe, or remarkably good timing, Axel muttered. And once we reach this temple, what then? Then I fulfill my purpose, Lyra said simply. And you gain the key to finding every remaining fragment of the prism. A loud explosion shook the building before Axel could respond. Dust rained from the ceiling as warning signals blared throughout the hideout. They've found us, shouted one of the resistance fighters, rushing to a monitoring station. Royal forces, at least 3 squads, with Cthulhu himself leading them. Aurel's expression hardened. They must have tracked your energy signature, Keeper. We must move immediately to the escape tunnels. We'll never outrun them, countered another fighter. Not with Cthulhu's magic guiding them. Then we fight, Aurel declared, activating an ancient-looking weapon. We've prepared for this day. Axel grabbed Lyra's arm. Is there another way to the temple? One that doesn't involve a suicide stand against royal forces? Lyra's eyes narrowed in concentration. The catacombs beneath the old city. They connect to tunnels that lead toward the wastes, but they're said to be haunted by the spirits of sacrifices past. Spirits I can handle, Axel decided. Sorcerers and armed guards. Less enthusiastically. Aurel overheard them. The catacombs entrance is in our secondary chamber. Genra will show you. He gestured to a young fighter. We'll hold them here as long as possible to cover your escape. You'll die, Lyra protested. The old chieftain smiled sadly. Many have already died to protect the Keeper. We do not fear joining them. He clasped Lyra's shoulder. Activate the prism. End Mork's tyranny. That is how you honor our sacrifice. Another explosion rocked the hideout, closer this time. The sounds of energy weapons and shouted commands filtered through the walls. This way, urged Genra, leading them toward a concealed door at the back of the chamber. Axel hesitated, looking at the determined faces of the resistance fighters preparing for battle. These weren't his people, not his fight, yet something about their courage resonated within him. Take these, he said, pulling spare energy cells from his pack and tossing them to Oral. "They'll boost your weapons output. Might buy you extra time." Oral caught them with a nod of appreciation. Perhaps the prophecies weren't so wrong after all. Treasure hunter. The hidden door led to a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Genra activated a light rod, illuminating stone steps, worn smooth by countless feet over centuries. "The catacombs extend for miles beneath the city," she explained, as they descended. "They date back to before the Mork conquest, when Garvox was ruled by philosopher kings who honored their dead instead of consuming them." "Cheerful history lesson," Axel remarked, keeping his blaster ready. "Any current residents we should worry about? Besides spirits. That is..." "Desert scavengers sometimes use the outer tunnels," Genra admitted. "And there are rumors of experiments, failed absorptions that Cthulhu discarded, but didn't fully eliminate." "Wonderful!" They reached the bottom of the staircase, emerging into a vast underground chamber lined with ancient stone sarcophagi. Faded murals depicted a civilization far more advanced and peaceful than the current Garvoxian society. "The temple lies due east," Genra said, pointing to a dark tunnel. "Follow this passage for 7 junctions, always taking the path marked with the rising sun symbol. It will lead you to the Howling Dunes. From there..." She hesitated. "From there. I cannot guide you. The temple reveals itself only to those it deems worthy." "How cryptically convenient," Axel muttered. Sounds of battle echoed down the stairwell, energy blasts, screams, and the distinctive crackle of Cthulhu's sorcery. "I must return to help them," Genra said, her expression resolute. "May the Ancient Ones guide your path." With that, she raced back up the stairs, weapon drawn. Axel and Lyra stood alone in the catacombs, the light rod casting long shadows across the ancient burial chamber. 7 junctions, rising sun symbols," Axel repeated. "Let's move before company arrives." They set off into the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The air grew increasingly stale as they ventured deeper into the catacombs, occasionally passing side chambers filled with archaeological treasures that would have once captured Axel's full attention. Now, survival took precedence over profit. "Tell me more about this prism," he said as they walked, partly from genuine curiosity and partly to distract from the eerie surroundings. "The fragments I've tracked were just broken pieces of crystal, valuable but seemingly ordinary. They would appear so without a keykeeper," Lyra explained. "The prism was created by the ancients to harness the fundamental energies of the universe, what some call life force, others soul energy. It can transform this energy into tangible power, but only when activated by one, born with the specific resonance pattern." Her fingers traced the glowing symbols on her arms. "My people were engineered to carry this pattern, to ensure the prism could never be misused. Yet here we are, running from people who very much want to misuse it. Knowledge has a way of surviving, even when its keepers try to hide it," Lyra said sadly. "The Mork learned of the prism's potential centuries ago. Their entire civilization evolved around the pursuit of energy absorption, hoping to one day control the ultimate source." They reached the first junction, where 3 identical tunnels branched off in different directions. Lyra held her light rod high, revealing faint symbols carved above each entrance. The rightmost tunnel bore the unmistakable etching of a rising sun. "This way," she indicated. As they progressed deeper, the tunnels began to change. The smooth, worked stone gave way to rougher passages that looked almost melted in places. Strange, crystalline formations jutted from the walls, emitting a faint phosphorescence. "These crystals," Axel observed, examining one closely. "They're similar to prism fragments, aren't they?" Lyra nodded. "Lesser cousins. The ancients built their temple at a nexus point of natural energy. These formations grew from the same principles, though they lacked the prism's focusing capabilities. At the 4th junction, they heard it, a distant, haunting wail that echoed through the tunnels. Axel raised his blaster instinctively. Our spiritual friends announcing themselves? Lyra's expression grew troubled. No. Something else. Something. Her eyes widened in alarm. We need to move. Now! They broke into a run, just as shadowy figures emerged from a side tunnel behind them. Twisted, malformed creatures that moved with unnatural speed. In the brief glimpse Axel caught, he saw pale Garvoxian features distorted by failed energy absorption experiments, bodies warped by power they couldn't contain. Cthulhu's discarded test subjects, Lyra gasped as they fled. He must have dumped them in the catacombs. The creatures pursued relentlessly, their movements eerily silent, save for occasional guttural moans. Axel fired his blaster over his shoulder, not daring to slow down enough for proper aim. A lucky shot caught the lead pursuer, dissolving it into particles of light that the others immediately absorbed, growing stronger. Don't shoot them, Lyra warned. It only makes the survivors more powerful. They raced through the 5th and 6th junctions, the pack of aberrations gaining ground with each turn. As they approached the 7th junction, a dead end loomed ahead. No visible exit, just a solid wall inscribed with ancient symbols. This can't be right, Axel panted, spinning to face their pursuers, who had slowed to a predatory stalking pace, aware their prey was cornered. Lyra pressed her hands against the wall, her skin beginning to glow with the same patterns as before. This is the way. The door responds only to a keykeeper's energy. The symbols on the wall illuminated in response to her touch. Lines of power, spreading outward in intricate patterns. The creatures closed in, their distorted forms silhouetted against the dim catacomb light. Axel positioned himself between them and Lyra, blaster raised despite its proven ineffectiveness. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, he urged. I need more power, Lyra said, her voice strained. The door is ancient, and my energy alone isn't enough after the ritual weakened me. Axel glanced at the approaching aberrations, then back at Lyra. Would their energy work? They're basically walking batteries of absorbed life force, right? Understanding dawned in Lyra's eyes. Yes, but how? Get ready to channel it, Axel interrupted. He adjusted his blaster settings to maximum dispersion and fired at the ceiling above the creatures. The blast shook the tunnel, bringing down chunks of crystal and stone. The aberrations screeched as they were struck, their forms destabilizing, releasing clouds of luminous energy. Now! Axel shouted. Lyra thrust out her free hand, drawing the released energy toward her in streams of light. The power flowed into her body and through to the wall, causing the symbols to blaze with blinding intensity. With a grinding rumble, the stone barrier split down the middle, revealing a tunnel bathed in natural light. Go! Axel urged, firing again to create another energy release as the remaining creatures regrouped for attack. They dashed through the opening, which sealed behind them with a decisive thud. The new tunnel sloped upward, its walls lined with the same crystalline formations, but larger, more refined. After several minutes of cautious progress, the passage opened onto a breathtaking sight, the vast expanse of the Howling Dunes, where sand the color of blood stretched to the horizon under twin setting suns. Wind-carved rock formations rose like sentinels across the landscape, creating the mournful howling sound that gave the region its name. In the distance, heat distortions shimmered above the sand, concealing whatever lay beyond. The temple is out there somewhere, Lyra said, shielding her eyes from the harsh glare. Hidden from those who would misuse its power. Axel checked his equipment, grimacing at the depleted state of his blaster and dwindling supplies. How far? Distance is fluid in the dunes, Lyra replied cryptically. The temple exists partially in another dimensional space. We must follow the energy currents to find the entrance point. Of course we must, Axel sighed. Because a simple map would be too straightforward. They set out across the desert, the sand shifting treacherously beneath their feet. The wind carried abrasive particles that stung exposed skin, forcing them to wrap protective cloths around their faces. As the sun sank lower, the temperature dropped dramatically, transforming the scorching desert into a freezing wasteland. Lyra led the way, her body occasionally glowing with internal light as she sensed the invisible energy currents. They walked for hours, circumnavigating massive sinkholes and avoiding areas where the sand moved with suspicious autonomy. Night fell completely, transforming the landscape. The dunes glowed with an eerie phosphorescence, similar to the crystals in the catacombs. Overhead, 3 moons cast conflicting shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. "We're crossing a threshold," Lyra explained, noting Axel's unease at the impossible shadows. "Reality is thinner here." A distant roar echoed across the dunes, followed by the distinctive hum of engines. "That doesn't sound like dimensional thinning," Axel said grimly. "That sounds like pursuit." They crested a dune to see a chilling sight. A convoy of royal skimmers racing across the desert, led by a hovering platform upon which stood the unmistakable figure of Cthulhu, his ruined skin glowing malevolently in the moonlight. Beside him stood a regal figure adorned with ceremonial armor, King Mork himself. "They're tracking your energy signature again," Axel realized. "Is there any way to mask it?" Lyra's expression grew determined. "Yes, but you won't like it." She pointed to a massive rock formation ahead, shaped like a grasping hand. "That's the Sentinel's Reach, a natural amplifier of mystical energies. If I channel my power through it, I can create a dispersal field that will confuse their sensors." "Why wouldn't I like that?" Axel asked suspiciously. "Because it will attract every energy-sensitive predator in the dunes," she admitted. "We'll be temporarily safe from Cthulhu, but prime targets for the desert hunters." Axel weighed their options as the convoy drew closer. "Between desert predators and a sorcerer who wants to boil you alive, I'll take my chances with local wildlife. Do it." They scrambled toward the rock formation, sliding down dunes and scrambling over razor-sharp stone outcroppings. Reaching the base of the Sentinel's Reach, Lyra placed her hands against the ancient stone, which thrummed with responsive energy. "Be ready," she warned. "Once I begin, we'll need to move quickly." Axel scanned their surroundings, identifying potential escape routes and defensive positions. "Ready as I'll ever be." Lyra closed her eyes in concentration. Her entire body began to glow, the light pulsing in rhythmic waves that spread into the rock formation. The stone absorbed her energy, amplifying it and projecting it outward in a massive burst that illuminated the entire desert. For a moment, everything was bathed in violet light. Then darkness returned, more absolute than before. In the distance, the royal convoy halted in confusion, their sensors overwhelmed by the energy dispersal. "It worked," Lyra whispered, her voice weakened by the effort. "They can't track us specifically now." "Great," Axel replied tensely. "Now about those predators." The sand around them began to shift, subtle at first, then with increasing agitation. From the dunes emerged sleek, segmented creatures with crystalline appendages and multiple sensory organs oriented in their direction. "Dune stalkers," Lyra identified them. "They feed on energy anomalies." "Fantastic!" Axel helped her to her feet. "Can you run?" "I need a moment to recover. The dispersal drained me significantly." Axel lifted her into his arms without hesitation. "Then consider this your moment." He set off at a sprint toward a narrow canyon between rock formations, the stalkers converging behind them with alarming speed. The creatures moved with liquid grace across the sand, their crystalline limbs leaving no tracks. As they closed the distance, they emitted high-pitched sounds that disoriented Axel, making his vision blur. Still, he pushed forward, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he navigated the treacherous terrain with Lyra in his arms. The canyon narrowed further, forcing Axel to set Lyra down so they could squeeze through a tight passage. The stalkers paused at the entrance, their sensory organs pulsing with indecision. They don't like confined spaces, Lyra observed. It limits their movement patterns, taking advantage of the momentary respite. They pushed deeper into the canyon, which wound its way through increasingly surreal rock formations. Stone arches curved impossibly overhead, defying gravity. Crystalline growths pulsed with internal light, responding to Lyra's presence. "We're getting closer," she said, her strength gradually returning. "The temple's influence grows stronger here." The canyon eventually opened onto a circular valley, nestled among towering cliffs. At its center stood a structure that simultaneously appeared to be an ancient ruin and a perfectly preserved temple, its state of existence shifting depending on the angle from which it was viewed. Constructed from the same crystalline material they'd seen throughout their journey, the temple pulsed with subtle power. "The ancient temple," Lyra breathed, reverence evident in her voice. "Sanctuary of the Prism." Axel stared in wonder. After years of searching for fragments and clues, the source of his obsession stood before him. "It's real," he murmured. "All this time, I wasn't chasing legends." A familiar roar shattered the moment. Looking back, they saw the royal convoy descending into the canyon they'd just traversed. Though the energy dispersal had confused their sensors temporarily, Cthulhu had apparently found another way to track them. "They're using the stalkers," Lyra realized, watching as the desert creatures led the convoy. "Cthulhu has bound them to his will." "Then we'd better get inside," Axel urged, already moving toward the temple entrance. As they approached, the crystalline structure responded to Lyra's presence. Dormant patterns illuminated along its surface, and a doorway materialized where solid crystal had been moments before. They rushed inside as energy blasts from the lead skimmers struck the ground where they'd stood. The temple interior was a breathtaking space of geometric precision. Crystal columns rose to dizzying heights, supporting a ceiling that somehow reflected the galaxy itself. The floor was inlaid with intricate patterns that subtly shifted and flowed like liquid light. At the center of the vast chamber stood a raised dais, upon which rested a pedestal of pure, transparent crystal. "The prism's cradle," Lyra said, moving toward it with purposeful steps. "This is where the primary fragment must be placed to begin the awakening." Axel circled the chamber, examining the ancient technology with a treasure hunter's appreciation. "Where is the fragment? I don't see anything that looks like—" His words cut off as Lyra placed her hand over her heart. With a fluid motion that seemed to bend reality itself, she extracted a glowing crystal shard from within her own chest, not physically, but as if it had existed in a dimensional pocket connected to her being. "You carried it inside you?" Axel asked, astonished. "The safest vault is one that exists between realities," Lyra explained, holding the primary fragment reverently. It pulsed with internal light, responding to her touch. "This is why the Mork could never access the prism, even if they succeeded in absorbing my energy. The connection is more than physical." A tremendous crash echoed through the temple as something massive struck the entrance. The crystalline walls shuddered, but held. "Cthulhu," Lyra said grimly. "He's using forbidden sorcery to breach the temple's defenses." "How long will they hold?" "Not long enough." She placed the primary fragment upon the pedestal, where it hovered inches above the surface, rotating slowly. "I must begin the activation immediately, but the process is complex. It requires—" Another crash, louder than the first. Fracture lines appeared in the doorway's crystalline structure. "Whatever it requires, do it quickly," Axel urged, readying his depleted blaster. "I'll buy you whatever time I can." Lyra's expression became solemn. "Axel, you should know. Activating the prism has consequences. The energy required, it must come from somewhere. Meaning I will need to draw life force from those present. Not all of it, but enough that it will weaken anyone nearby. Her eyes met his. Including you. Axel absorbed this information with a grim nod. Will it stop Cthulhu and Mork? If fully activated, the prism can generate a shield of light capable of neutralizing their powers and protecting this place indefinitely. Another impact shook the temple. The entrance fractured further, shards of crystal falling to the floor. Then do what you must, Axel decided. I've survived worse odds. Lyra nodded gratefully and turned to the pedestal. Placing her hands on either side of the hovering fragment, she began an intricate series of movements. The symbols on her skin brightened until she appeared to be composed of pure light. The fragment responded, its rotation accelerating as it drew energy from her. Axel positioned himself near the weakening entrance, calculating angles for maximum defensive coverage with minimal ammunition. The next impact brought the barrier down completely, revealing Cthulhu standing amidst the rubble, his arms raised in mystic gestures, eyes blazing with power. Behind him stood King Mork and a contingent of royal guards. The keykeeper and the thief, Cthulhu hissed, his voice distorted by the energies he channeled. How convenient to find you both with the primary fragment. Sorry to disappoint, but we're not in a sharing mood, Axel replied, firing a precise blast that Cthulhu deflected with contemptuous ease. Your primitive weapon cannot harm me. The sorcerer laughed. I have absorbed the essence of 1,000 species. I am beyond physical concerns. King Mork stepped forward, his ceremonial armor glinting in the temple's light. Surrender the keykeeper and the fragment, off-worlder, and perhaps I shall grant you a quick death, rather than the prolonged absorption you deserve. Tempting, Axel drawled. But I'll pass. He fired again, this time aiming not at Cthulhu, but at the unstable crystal formations above the entrance. The blast struck true, bringing down a cascade of razor-sharp shards upon the intruders. Cthulhu raised a protective barrier, but several guards weren't as fortunate. Their screams were cut short as the crystal struck, their bodies dissolving into pure energy that the sorcerer immediately absorbed, growing visibly stronger. You only feed my power, Cthulhu snarled, advancing into the temple with Mork close behind. Behind Axel, Lyra's activation ritual intensified. The primary fragment now spun so rapidly it appeared as a sphere of light, its brilliance filling the chamber. Axel felt the first tendrils of weakness as it began drawing energy from everything nearby, exactly as Lyra had warned. How much longer? He called to her, his voice already sounding strained. The resonance pattern is establishing, she replied, her own voice ethereal and distant. But Cthulhu's presence is creating interference. I need more time. Axel's tactical mind raced. Time was the one resource they didn't have. Cthulhu and Mork approached steadily, the sorcerer gathering dark energy between his palms for a devastating attack. More energy, Axel muttered, remembering how they'd escaped the catacombs. An idea formed, desperate, possibly suicidal, but their only chance. Lyra, can the fragment absorb Cthulhu's power if it's directed at it? Yes, but he'd never willingly. He doesn't need to be willing, Axel interrupted. Just angry. And I'm very good at making people angry. Before she could protest, Axel charged directly at Cthulhu, firing his last energy cell in a wide dispersal pattern. The blasts were easily deflected, but they served their purpose, drawing the sorcerer's full attention. Your death will be legendary, thief, Cthulhu promised, gathering a massive orb of destructive energy between his hands. Axel continued his charge, closing the distance between them with reckless speed. At the last possible moment, he dropped into a slide, passing beneath Cthulhu's guard and driving his depleted blaster directly into the sorcerer's torso. Now, Lyra, he shouted. Cthulhu howled in rage, releasing his gathered power directly at Axel at point-blank range. But Axel was already moving, twisting to position the sorcerer between himself and the primary fragment. The devastating blast passed through him, agonizing but not immediately fatal, and continued toward Lyra and the fragment. With perfect timing, Lyra adjusted her stance and channeled the incoming energy directly into the spinning fragment. The crystal absorbed Cthulhu's attack, its light changing from pure white to a spectrum of colors that rippled outward in concentric waves. "No!" Cthulhu screamed, realizing too late what was happening. He tried to halt his attack, but the connection was established. The primary fragment drew power from him relentlessly, feeding the activation process. King Mork rushed forward, attempting to interrupt the energy flow, but the emanating waves of power held him at bay. "Destroy her!" he commanded his remaining guards, "before the prism fully awakens." The guards raised their weapons, but Axel, despite his weakened state, intercepted them, fighting through pain and fatigue. He engaged 3 guards simultaneously, using their numbers against them in the confined space near the entrance. Behind him, Lyra had entered the final phase of activation. The primary fragment now hovered higher above the pedestal, its light so intense it was difficult to look at directly. The patterns on Lyra's skin had expanded beyond her body, creating a network of luminous symbols throughout the temple. "It's ready!" she called, her voice resonating strangely, as if coming from multiple sources simultaneously. "Axel, get clear!" With a desperate surge of strength, Axel broke free from the guards and dove toward the center of the chamber. Cthulhu, realizing what was about to happen, abandoned his attack on the fragment and lunged for Lyra, dark energy gathering around his clawed hands. Axel saw the movement and made his decision in an instant. Using the last of his strength, he changed direction mid-dive and threw himself into Cthulhu's path. The sorcerer's claws raked across his chest instead of reaching Lyra, drawing a cry of pain from Axel as he collapsed to the temple floor. "Now!" he gasped. Lyra brought her hands together in a thunderous clap. The primary fragment responded with a pulse of pure white light that expanded outward in a perfect sphere. Where it touched, it transformed, neutralizing Cthulhu's dark sorcery, dissolving the guards' weapons, and forcing King Mork to his knees. The shield of light coalesced into a dome of pulsating energy that encompassed the entire temple. Outside its boundaries, the royal forces found their technology failing, their weapons useless. Inside, a profound peace settled over everything, except for the writhing form of Cthulhu, whose stolen energies were being systematically neutralized by the prism's power. "This cannot be!" the sorcerer wailed as his body began to destabilize, the countless absorbed souls finding release from his control. "I am Cthulhu the Eternal. I cannot be undone by a mere artifact." King Mork watched in horror as his most powerful weapon disintegrated before his eyes. Without Cthulhu's sorcery, he was merely a tyrant with delusions of grandeur, not the god-king he had proclaimed himself to be. "Retreat!" he commanded, staggering toward the entrance. "All forces retreat!" Lyra knelt beside Axel, her hands gentle on his wounded chest. "Stay with me," she urged, her voice returning to its normal cadence as the activation process completed. "The prism's power can heal you." "Did it work?" Axel asked weakly, his vision blurring. "Is the shield established?" "Yes. The temple is protected, and the primary fragment is fully awakened. It will now begin calling to the other pieces, drawing them here over time." She guided a stream of pure energy from the fragment to his wounds. "You saved more than just me today, Axel Voss. You saved the legacy of the ancients." As the healing energy flowed through him, Axel felt strength returning to his limbs. The pain receded, replaced by a curious warmth that spread throughout his body. He sat up cautiously, watching as King Mork and his remaining forces fled the temple, unable to withstand the prism's purifying light. "What happens now?" he asked, observing the primary fragment, which had settled into a steady, rhythmic pulse above its pedestal. Lyra's expression became thoughtful. "Now the real work begins. The fragment will call its brethren, but they won't come on their own. Many are locked in stasis fields or hidden in dimensional pockets, similar to how I protected the primary piece. Meaning someone needs to retrieve them, Axel concluded. Yes, someone who knows how to find rare treasures, who has contacts throughout the galaxy, who understands the value of artifacts beyond their monetary worth. Her gaze met his meaningfully. Someone like you. Before Axel could respond, a tremor passed through the shield of light. The primary fragment pulsed more intensely, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy, with dozens of points illuminated at various locations. The fragment has identified its missing pieces, Lyra said with wonder. It knows where each one rests. Axel studied the map with professional interest, already mentally calculating routes and resources needed for such an extensive treasure hunt. Some of these are in extremely dangerous or restricted sectors. All the more reason they need someone skilled to retrieve them, Lyra pointed out. The hidden resistance has contacts who can provide support, but they need a leader for this mission, someone with first-hand knowledge of the prism's importance. And what about you? Axel asked. You're the keykeeper. Don't you need to stay with the fragment? Lyra's expression turned solemn. The activation process has changed me. She held up her hands, which now permanently glowed with the fragment's light. I've become bonded to the prism in ways even my people never fully understood. I must remain here, maintaining the shield and preparing for the day when all fragments are reunited. So I'd be on my own. Not entirely. She touched his chest, over his heart. The energy that healed you has left its mark. You now carry a resonance pattern similar to mine. Not enough to activate the prism, but enough to identify and safely handle its fragments. Her eyes met his. In a sense, you've become a keykeeper too. The implications settled over Axel. For years, he'd hunted treasures solely for profit, living by the code of self-preservation above all else. Yet in the span of a single day, he'd risked everything to save a stranger, fought against overwhelming odds, and discovered a purpose beyond mere survival. It would be dangerous, he said slowly. The Mork won't give up easily. Once they regroup, they'll be hunting for the fragments too. Yes, Lyra agreed. And others will join the hunt once word spreads. The galaxy is full of those who would misuse the prism's power. Axel looked around the ancient temple, at the shield of light protecting them, at the primary fragment pulsing with potential, and finally, at Lyra, a being he'd saved on impulse who had, in turn, shown him a greater destiny. I suppose I was getting bored with standard treasure hunting anyway, he decided with a crooked smile. Too predictable. This, at least, promises to be interesting. Lyra's face brightened with hope. Then you'll do it? You'll find the fragments? I'll find them, Axel confirmed, rising to his feet with newfound determination. And I'll bring them home, where they belong, outside the shield of light. The crimson sands of Garvox continued their eternal dance across the desert. The royal forces of King Mork retreated to their city, already plotting revenge. And somewhere in the void between stars, the scattered fragments of the ancient prism stirred in response to their awakened core, waiting to be found. In the temple, Lyra guided Axel to a crystalline platform where the holographic map projected in greater detail. The nearest fragment appears to be in the Corsair Nebula, she observed. A lawless region, but nothing you haven't navigated before. How do you know what I've navigated before? Axel asked, raising an eyebrow. Lyra smiled mysteriously. The prism knows much about those it chooses, and it chose you, Axel Voss, long before you rescued me from that cauldron. As darkness fell over the desert, a soft violet light emanated from the temple, visible for miles across the dunes, a beacon of hope in a galaxy of shadows, and the beginning of a quest that would span worlds, challenge empires, and perhaps restore balance to powers long forgotten. Axel Voss, treasure hunter turned guardian, stood at the threshold of this new chapter, the resonance of the prism humming within him like a promise. The path ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was a path with purpose. And in the vastness of space, the scattered fragments of the ancient prism awaited, their power dormant but not diminished, ready to be reunited by the unlikely hero who had once sought them merely for profit, but would now seek them for salvation.